So this is my lovely panel. Look at this, look, it's like a beauty parade, and I did point out the chairs. Why didn't we get them bucket chairs? They can get them a stool. That keeps them on their toes. Nobody will go to sleep. That's what we do have. So I'm going to let each and every one of them introduce themselves individually. So it's a bit like a talent contest. Now you can sing it, you can make it entertaining for people. But the main idea is that you give everybody in the audience an idea of who you are, what your background is, and sort of what you bring to the audience so they know how to direct their questions. Am I missing someone? Is that
Who should be there?
Rory? Is Rory in the building?
I'm here.
Rory!
You missing too much.
You're sorry, but nothing like that. Rory's going to do a quick song and dance for us. He comes especially, Rory. Sorry, Rory. I thought they thought that was for me. I was thinking, listen, that's a bit cutchy, as they'd say in Wales. So I'll let Rory get comfortable, but Danny, if we start with Danny Doyle, can you just present yourself and let everyone know what you can offer today?
Yeah, I'm Danny Doyle. I'm very embarrassed at the picture that's been chosen for today. You'll be sad to see I no longer look like that. I'm Danny Doyle. I work in product management for Access Pay. For anyone who doesn't know what a product manager is, it's the role of speaking to our customers, finding out what pain points we can solve in the products and services that we offer. Access Pay connect corporates to banks and banks to corporates, so it's a kind of full cycle of doing payments, bank statements, reconciliation, that sort of stuff. Main focus is in the UK, but we do a bit of European and international stuff as well. I have been working with Pay UK and some other organisations over the last few years to kind of support the vision of what the future of UK payments looks like, and I hope to be able to dispel some of the myths. There's a lot of rubbish going around. There's a lot of people concerned that changes in payments are going to negatively affect them, and I hope to sort of allay those fears and concerns and answer any questions that you've got.
Thanks, Danny. I'm going to follow the order of the photos, not to confuse you all, okay? So Nadine Hack, you're next.
That's a very old photo as well. I think that's, you've got that from
Facebook, I think.
Facebook.
Or somewhere. Yeah, it's very modern in this world.
That's on my honeymoon. That's like 13 years ago. So Nadine Haque, I work in Barclays and in the corporate bank. I work in the payments and cash management, product management function. My primary responsibility here is around open banking and making sure from a corporate bank perspective we are compliant with the regulations that are with us today and in the future around open banking and PSD2 and CMA. The breakout session that I'll be doing later on, we'll talk more about open banking. What does that mean for you guys? What does that mean for the industry? And how this has the potential to change banking as we see it today. Open banking is there to stimulate new innovation, new entrants into the market, kind of overlay banking on top of traditional banking, and we can explore how that would work for you.
I was chatting just in one of the breakouts, so the Dean's based in London, and I think it was Nadine and Toby that were chatting just about some of this. And honestly, when they bring it down to where we are and where we were, and they put it into everyday environments like telechannels,
yes.
For people like me, it works really well. So it really is an interesting space, not to be fearful of all these changes, but to see what opportunities it's going to really open up. And we've already dispelled 2 myths. Can I just show the photos? Just shows you can't trust Facebook, everybody. So Neelam, over to you if you'd like to.
Thank you. And sad enough, that is a fairly recent photograph, and I definitely don't like it. So yeah, my name is Neelam Putra. Work in the same division as Nadine over in London. So I head up the domestic UK electronic payments, so that's your BACS, chats, faster payments and international payments. Clearly front and centre for me is ensuring that the products that we offer out are absolutely fit for purpose, that they are absolutely compliant, and actually that we see what's coming down the tracks from a direction of travel. So we know, and I certainly can see, the changes that are coming through. So I'm here today really to kind of answer any questions you've got, support my colleagues certainly from Access Pay, Pay UK, in respect of the change agenda that's coming through, because certainly within Barclays and within my team, I'm incepting a change agenda to make sure that we are steady as she goes.
Thanks, Nina. Rory, you are there. You see, I am there.
It's rare you get to go before your boss, so that's nice. I'm Rory Edwards from Pay.UK. I work in the public affairs and stakeholder engagement team there. I specialise in, more often than not, in the new payments architecture and also the overlay services that are attached to it, or we consider attached to it in-house at Pay.UK. Now, hopefully we'll be able to spell a few myths about that today, and also talk about some of the opportunities that will come along from it. Overlay services sounds technical language, but all it means really is something that adds something, or it's not payment in itself, but can add something to a payment. So maybe an extra bit of security, or perhaps start a conversation about how someone would like to pay for something. The big two that we have in the pipeline at the moment are confirmation of pay and request to pay. So look forward to talking a bit about that later on.
Thank you, Rory. And Toby, not last but definitely not least.
Thank you very much. I'm Toby Sheldon, I'm Director of Communications at Pay.UK. So Pay.UK is responsible for all the retail payment operations in checks, faster payments, backs, direct debit, direct credit. We also look after the current account switching service, PayM, and a variety of other services. So our task is to bring together all of those payment operations into one consolidated operation. We've just been through about a year of acquiring the talent and expertise in the industry, acquiring those businesses. We've just consolidated, done our TUPE last week, and we are now one organisation. And the next period for us is about bringing our services together into one seamless organisation. At the same time, we were handed over the blueprint for the new payments architecture, MPA, back in December 2017. So we are modernising and building the clearing and settlement rails and all of the architecture and ecosystem that connects with that. And that's the massive change. And we were speaking before, it's quite a cause-related legacy that hopefully we're setting in place for the next generation. So I look forward to talking to you about our role. Just say in my role, in my team at Pay.UK, we have marketing, brands, obviously internal comms, press, PR, but we also have stakeholder engagement, and hugely important to the business is that we reach out and we take advice and feedback from participants, banks, building societies, but also corporates and end users on how we should shape the future. So this is really important for us as we reach out to different parts of the UK.
Brilliant, thank you all. So as you can see, I've got a panellist of experts there. So now a couple of you gave me some questions when I was out there earlier, but before we start, has anybody got a question they would like to ask the panel to get the ball rolling? I don't know if you get one of mine. Okay, I'm going to start with one of mine, and then let's see how we go from there. So, question, I'm going to ask this to Neelam, but I've been asked this by 3 people this morning, in some varied way, shape or form. So, will backs be entirely eradicated? If so, what's next?
Interesting. I think I've come across that question so many times as certainly the Pay.UK consultation has taken flight. Quite simply, no. It's not going anywhere. It's going to stay. You know, to effectively re-engineer backs as we've known it to date would take a significant amount of efforts. To the point around the change agenda, yes, there are changes coming through, likely to be more around enhancements, but I may look to Toby to backfill some of the responses there.
Yes, so absolutely not, right? We've heard this around the industry. We're trying to respond to it wherever we can. Direct debit, direct credit is an essential part of the payments ecosystem and connects directly with the clearing and settlement rail. Right? It's a service that we feel we are in the best position, Pay.UK, to continue delivering to the market and to the industry, and you know, we don't think otherwise. We will go through a process of consulting with the industry when we're redesigning the new payments architecture or designing it, to understand what opportunities there are for direct debit, direct credit within that ecosystem. We may be able to do more. It may be that your own customers, banks, building society customers, as well as corporates, want more from that in different ways. So we're going through a lot of consultation. we urge you to be involved with that, but no, absolutely not, Access is not dying.
Any feedback from anyone or any follow-up question on that, or anyone heard differently?
Hi, I was just, that's really interesting. How do customers and corporates become involved in that sort of consultation?
That's fantastic. Thank you for asking that, because that gives me a bit of advertising space. So, go to our website. There are all of our opportunities on there. At the moment, we are working through particular consultation around how we build the architecture. We have advisory groups, a number of advisory groups, which some of the people in here are on at the moment. We've been through a first wave of advisory. We will go through consultation as well. We have a procurement exercise going on for landing the vendor and partner we use to build the architecture with us. Beyond that are all of the services that Rory was talking about. There are loads of opportunities there. Have a look at the advisory groups. Tap into the response mechanisms. We have mailboxes waiting to hear from anybody.
Does anyone currently feed into any of the work streams? So possibly a good. We can send out the website address following this, so we'll pick that up, and hopefully that might be an opportunity for people.
So we're aware that a lot of stuff is going on within London, right? And we have a number of regional roundtables that we are putting together ourselves. We're also working closely with Access Pay on their outreach as well. There will be opportunities for us to come out to region, and we want to hear the different aspects and the different sort of ways that people want payments to work for them.
I think we're already scheduled to be back in Newcastle in October. We'll be looking for a nice venue.
I think the Eagle Lab might just keep
Can I just add something that sort of highlights the importance of that? So I've been a bit of a thorn in Toby's side for a couple of years now. I think we get on well, but I try and be the voice of the corporate, because you're not paying my mortgage. The importance of engaging and having your voice heard, I would say, if you look years ago when they announced they were going to abolish cheques, take a step back. Payments is a very small world. Everyone knows each other, everyone has their opinions, they might disagree, but it's quite a small community. About a decade ago they announced they were going to abolish cheques, and everyone was like, yeah, of course, cheques is a load of course we're going to do that, yeah, why would we not? And then charities and older people said, hold your horses, we get loads of cheques from old people, and then old people said, we send loads of cheques to charities, don't get rid of cheques. And that decision was reversed because they absolutely needed that service to be able to access payments. So really would recommend, especially corporates that work in finance or payments or even IT, you guys use payment systems more than anyone up on this panel. So I'd really recommend you check out the Pay UK website. Just start reading up on what's going on, keep yourself informed for the next few years.
The other option there, and I don't know, but if anyone in the room is a bit like all of us at the moment, time is obviously our most precious resource, and finding the time to research and then to participate in these kind of forums can be difficult. That's often why people don't. So it could be, most of us will have people in our teams that are looking to develop, that are looking to take on more responsibility, niching things like that out so that they get your ideas, they bring it up on a monthly meeting or a weekly meeting or whatever you do, and then their responsibility is to engage on your behalf is a really good idea to be able to get your voice heard, but at the same time not give yourself another job, which I bet your to-do list is quite big already. So that's something that I've realised is that, some of these forums and some of the youth, they're very good on these forums, better than me actually. So an idea to make sure your voice is heard, but not giving yourself another 3 hours to try and find in a day.
I think just to probably complement what's been said there, I think absolutely the Pay UK forums are a great way to kind of feed in any concerns or comments you've got. I'm also very conscious from where I am that actually with a number of customers there are various different relationships in play, right? You'll have a relationship with a software solution provider, you'll either have a relationship directly with a Barclays or HSBC or whomever. So there's likely to be varying themes of information that will be made available to you. So I guess to the point around some of the points coming around about Bax dying, you know, we've dispelled that and saying it's not happening. One of the things I'm certainly doing with my team is pulling together some, I'll call it FAQs, from a corporate central perspective that we will make available to the teams that can then be downward shared. Because again, I'm very conscious of the various number of advisory groups, and again, I'm very conscious of kind of the time and the bandwidth. So we're trying to address that, certainly from my perspective, to aid with that. Certainly from a Barclays perspective, in terms of what the change means for us and what the change could potentially mean for yourselves. And that's clearly outside of BATS, in terms of whether it's confirmation of payee, request to pay, dare I say the FPS limit increase, whole plethora of things that are coming through. So we're certainly looking to address that.
And I think that's really important in terms of a two-way dialogue for all of us. I really appreciate your time today. It's very rare you're going to have this regularly, but WebEx is a marvellous thing, isn't it? You know, it's very easy to put a WebEx on for 20 minutes, half an hour. People can dial into on said topic, and it's easy for any of these to dial in and you know, we can get more. So I think that dialogue between the banks and our clients is, and different people within an organisation, is really important. So if you think of anything today on the feedback, or just email your relationship team and just sort of say, I'm really interested in this, but I'd like it in this format. And we can be very, you know, dexterous in how we deliver messages to you, because we're very aware of how precious time is. Any other questions on BACS before we move on? Because I'm sure there's a burning question in this audience somewhere. Yes.
Yeah, just a question in relation to what's happening on faster payments with confirmation of payee, because is it the sort of thing that's likely to happen for BACS as well? Because it's the sort of thing that would overcome a few things.
Okay, so confirmation of payee as it's developed is payment neutral. So it's an overlay service, what we call a messaging service, so it attaches something to payments, not payments. So, that said, it's designed specifically to combat or to be part of the solution to a couple of types of fraud. Things like impersonation, where someone pretends to be someone else, essentially. Those types of fraud are most prevalent through FP and through chaps. So we imagine that is going to be the main place we see confirmation of pay as it starts off. That said, there is planned, probably in around summer this year, for us to start examining a phase 2 of confirmation of pay. And we're going to be looking at whether it's something that would be helpful to expand to other types. Now, what we don't want to do is we want to do this for you guys, not in spite of you. So it's really a time that we're looking for your feedback, and that will be something that will be advertised really heavily, because we really want these corporates essentially to be involved in anything that we do in the future. So there's no hard answer yet, but it is possible. But whether it would be helpful is really something that's up to you.
If I could complement what you said there exactly, and I guess sitting in the seat from a Barclays perspective and developing out the COP service, as I call it, it's actually been quite an interesting journey, because it's absolutely right, it's an overlay service. As I understand it, faster payments and chaps absolutely. BACS credits, yeah, are in scope from a phase 1 perspective, certainly from the documentation that I've seen. So my teams are kind of working through what that means. Again, thinking about the relationships in this space, you will have software solution providers or other parties out there that will potentially come to you and say, I've got a COP service that I could add on to your current payment solution format. So an integration or a one-off. I think it'll be quite clear as we move along, certainly in the next month or so, how many entities will deliver out and execute upon a confirmation of pay service. And the phase 2 aspect will be actually a really interesting one, because you start to think about things like the impacts on hawker accounts, indirect payments. I'm actually a member of the confirmation of pay advisory group, so I do have quite a lot of fun, in the nicest sense of the term, actually kind of challenging in the right way with the Pay UK guys, just to ensure that the governance framework is absolutely right, that the liabilities framework is absolutely right as well, and indeed, again, ensuring that the likes of your good selves are aware of what it means and what it means to your own payment processing needs.
Does anyone not know what COP is?
Good question.
Might be worth a quick step back. Does anyone in the audience know what COP is, confirmation of payee? Does anyone want to volunteer an answer? Okay. So confirmation of pay as it stands is, so Rory hinted at APP fraud, so it's authorised push payment fraud. So anyone who works in finance for a business may have had sort of invoice redirection. Somebody might have impersonated your CEO and said, you've got to send a payment to this bank account urgently. It's trying to stop that kind of fraud. It's in the hundreds of millions, I think, for consumers and businesses as well. So phase one, from what I've heard, will primarily be in online banking for users or consumer customers, and then can move on to corporates as well. We're really keen to get something like that integrated within our own solution, but we're very mindful that it puts a bit of a focus back on corporates. So what it does is it checks the name of the account that you're sending the money to. So if you think you're sending Danny Doyle his payroll or expenses or whatever, it will check that the name matches Danny Doyle. And if it's D Doyle, you might get a, okay, it's very, very similar, but that doesn't match. And if it says John Thompson, it'll say no, and it will give you the opportunity to remove that payment from that payment run. Again, I would strongly urge you get involved and start reading up on that stuff, because what nobody wants to do is introduce a load of friction and make reviewing payments a really arduous task. However, what I think everyone on the panel does want to do is help stop fraudsters nicking your money.
Friction's a really important word, because like we only want friction in a payment when it's necessary, and it's exactly as Danny says, when, well, you're paying the wrong person. The rest of the time we want it to go through as if nothing has happened. It's not meant to be arduous, it's meant to be better. So that's very much the aim of the service.
Can I just ask, how do you go about getting the bank account name? Because presumably that means you need access to every bank account across the whole country in every bank.
It's why it's really, 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 really complex. And it's why we're not allowed to plug into it on day one. So the idea is this will be an interbank thing. So the banks have the account names. It is a big task, don't get me wrong, and that's why I've been a thorn in Toby's side. I'm like, let me use this service, and he's like, you're not a bank. I was like, well, okay, fair enough. There are big sort of GDPR and liability concerns as well, because what it essentially does is it falls onto the bank to say, if you don't flag up that it was John Thompson who owned the account and you thought it was Danny Doyle, that the bank might be then liable for that. So it's a super complex scenario, but the banks have that information, and they'll be
essentially it's a central CRM service that's networked to all the banks, and that's what confirmation of pay will interact with.
Yeah.
When this is available, obviously corporates might want to utilise that availability to do that, and then they could carry on working the way they are. Will there be a hard deadline when everyone has that becomes a requirement?
Good question.
Yeah,
So like essentially, from Pay.UK's point of view, that so banks or participants have everything they need to start implementing this service, but it doesn't mean that they can do it tomorrow, because it's got to be done in a safe and secure way that doesn't, well, break everything essentially. It's not in our gift to tell banks to do that now, but the Payment Systems Regulator is consulting on the time frame. And so we're yet to have a response to that consultation, but I understand it's due very soon. From something recently that was mentioned in the press, I think we're not talking in the next 2-3 months, which is maybe in the initial time frame. We're talking over the next year. This is something we expect to see, but that isn't a decision that will be made by us. It's by the PSR, and I have no special insight into when exactly that will be mandatory for faster payments participants.
I guess what's driving the thought on that particular question is everybody has to be involved for one bank to be able to authorise a name check against somebody else's bank. It's the same that we're having with, you mentioned checks before, we're putting together a check imaging service. Everybody has to be on board for that to work in interbank sort of service. So we're trying to facilitate and link with the whole industry as best we can, but it requires uptake on the bank's behalf. So.
Right. Yes, Catherine.
Yes, so just another question. I'm thinking for the audience in the room really, if there was anybody sitting here thinking, actually I'd like to start imagine a lot of the payment files might just have an initial on, as you said. Should corporates be looking at maybe start sort of planning that enhancement to their files to include full names now, or should it be waiting?
So actually, there's a certain amount of logic that will go into name recognition, and it's entirely up to the individual banks or building societies under Know Your Customer sort of conditions to decide how much they want that to be an exact match or not. So it's actually up to your bank building societies to take that decision within a threshold, right? And that will be a risk sort of liability consideration for those banks. Some may actually decide that Tony Sheldon would, check back. That would clearly check back and say that's not the name that's on the account. T Sheldon, TH Sheldon. There are variations that we use. It's not a great example. John, Jonathan, Johnny, those sort of names. And it will be up to the banks to decide how close. We've got our colleague Brian Cunnington uses his example of Brian Cunningham. Well, some may accept that, some may not. So it depends on the knowledge of that particular customer and how many times that's happening and all those sort of parameters as well. So that won't be up to us, it will be up to the providers. Yeah.
I think one thing the corporates can do though, when you're next refreshing your stationery or new supplier onboarding, or I think suppliers is probably the key one. If I don't get my payroll, they're going to know about it before they notice it, because I'm going to be on the phone shouting. I think the suppliers are probably a key one. I think one thing you can start doing now is look at how you manage that process of onboarding a supplier, and actually going back and looking at your existing supplier records you've got, making sure it's got the proper limited company name, and making sure you're checking that on Companies House. It takes 15 seconds to go on better.companieshouse.gov.uk, and you can go in, stick the name of the company in there, double check that it matches. I think the interesting one will be person to person actually, because autocorrect is a bloody nightmare. I won't say the word it always turns Danny into, but it's really frustrating. So I think person to person is going to be interesting because there's going to be a lot of mobile and fat fingers, as they call it. But certainly when you're dealing with a business or onboarding a new member of staff, just look at how you sort of filter that information into your back office systems, because then when it does come about and you do start checking against these names, you're not going to get a load of unnecessary friction because you've done those things up front.
I think just to add to that, sorry, go
The
ahead.
majority of back office systems we use in the local authority will have a limit of about 25 characters on a name field. So it isn't just about putting the right information in. Anybody who says can't because they're restricted, it's not validated at the point of entry, it's just a free format field.
Yeah.
So you get so many variations going through for the same customer. But then if you're looking at the people who already have set up, who have regular payments with and payments going back and forward, how will that impact going backwards even if the software applications do extend? Because we're going to have to change everything from the front office to the back.
Yeah.
Can I add to that? So I mean, really good, interesting questions. I think the key thing from my perspective is kind of understanding that the COP service is going to be made available. Whether it's then a mandation to be embedded into a file of payments is another matter. That's not coming through. I think if you take it to the highest level, the PSR's ask is to ensure that you deliver a confirmation of pay service. So in turn, you can reduce the frauds, the risks and scams. You then look at it from, I guess, a bank perspective or a participant's perspective. How would you then look to roll that service out? Do you deal with your P2Ps? Yeah, so actually name checking happens for a Mary Jo that's trying to pay nephew some money, or do you then look at bulk payments, or do you then offer, dare I say it, a standalone solution? It's almost like EISCD in steroids. It gives you the ability to kind of check the name before you even execute a payment. So certainly from our perspective, and many of my colleagues around, I say the advisory group, they're working through actually how they would deliver that out to their customers. For now, I think it's key to remind ourselves that it's about making that service available, as opposed to it being mandated to be part of a file of payments today. From my perspective, again, just complementing what I said earlier, we are working through the confirmation of paid product solution offering, and in turn as part of, I guess, our FAQs and all that lovely stuff we'll socialise, we'll make it clear to your good selves as to what that means to you and how you could actually make use of that service without actually adding friction to bulk payment solutions today.
What we're gonna do is we're gonna break out. I've still got a couple of questions that came out, and I think you can cover it off in the 2 sessions. So I'll share the questions with both areas because they kind of split anyway. But I think that point you made and about how do corporates prepare, it's what we're finding in Barclays, and this is just something I'd share over the 10 years that I've been. I used to go and talk to payment teams, and I used to talk to them about payments. That's what we used to do. The team would come out, we talked. And what I'm noticing more and more is we now go out and we talk to the payment team, the IT team, the marketing team, the HR team, all around a table, and it's because some of the stuff that's coming through in the payment landscape, I mean, your roles, you are the key people on the table now. I mean, the stuff that is coming through and that will either be coming through now, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, means that as change programs start to be implemented into your organisations, IT people, you say about fields that, that don't allow X, but allow, who would ever have thought that if it's, so if IT are about to introduce a new, what would be the equivalent of a client relationship management system or something, it needs to talk to the treasury function. So I just think that that's where I see use us as well. We can come in and we can look at it holistically, we can work with you, keeping abreast of all these things, and these kind of FAQs that are coming out, or feedback from pay.uk or whatever, Access Pay, this is where we can help you to try and think ahead. And even on a practical level, you might notice it'll come to the summer term, Easter to the summer, and how many kids when you get saying, can we come and do a work experience for a week? And you sit there and you think, what are we going to do with them for a week? It's like, well, what a great way they can go onto a database, they can correct a name, and these little projects to start thinking. Actually, in the summer we might get 3 youths in. They can all use Excel. They can all go onto an internet. Maybe that's a job they can do for you that will be sort of future-proofing where we're going in payments, because it is moving at pace. And what's complicated from my perspective for you when I think about it all is some of it is what's happening. It's regulatory, it's legislative, it's fraud related. We're going to be moving because the environment we're all working in is moving so fast. So some great questions there. Thank you, panel, for that. Thank you. See, thank you on there. So now we're going to split. This is going to be nice because all it does is make you a smaller group. So this half of the room, you are staying put, if you wouldn't mind. And this half of the room, we're just going to move you into the boardroom. So Boromea, she'll show you. But I'm going to give the questions to the panel because the same people are going to run them. So I'm sure, I promise you, they'll all be covered off, and then you're going to split again. So, and then grab coffee if you want to, or there's a break in between the next split, 20 minutes time, for you to grab coffee to come back in. So see you soon. Thank you.